Next Chapter Podcasts.
Huddle up. It's me, Angel Reese. You can't beat the post-game burger and fries, right? Know what else you can't beat? The Angel Reese Special. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. It's gonna be a high C for me. Sound good? All you have to do to get it is beat me in a one-on-one. I'm just playing. Get the Angel Reese Special at McDonald's now. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free Second Look review. Second Look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
Hi, my name is Michael Goodfriend, and I'm the executive producer of the Play On podcast series As You Like It. Today, I have with me Andy Grotelueschen. Your test, dear listener, is to spell that name. Andy Grotelueschen is a seasoned professional actor. He's been on Broadway in Tootsie, where he got a Tony nomination. He's been in Cyrano de Bergerac. He is a core member of the wonderful Fiasco Theater that did Measure for Measure as a Play On podcast with us. He's done lots of shows with them and all over New York. He's one of those downtown New York actors, one of those cool guys who gets to work in all the cool theaters in the city and on Broadway and off Broadway and regionally. He's been at Yale Rep, the Old Globe, the Guthrie, the McCarter, Trinity Rep. And he has also appeared in lots of films and television shows, The Gilded Age, Driven, Lincoln Rhyme, Elementary, The Good Wife, The Good Cop, The Nick. He went to Brown Trinity to get his master's in fine arts. And he is with me here today. He plays Touchstone in this wonderful, wonderful series. Andy Grotelueschen, welcome to the bonus content series for the Play On podcast series As You Like It.
Huzzah! Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us about Touchstone, one of the most interesting characters in all of the Shakespearean canon. Had you ever encountered Touchstone as an actor before this Play On podcast series?
You know, I think I'd seen a couple of productions of As You Like It in my adult life, and it's always an interesting spot for a production to choose the period or sort of what the analog is for how they're going to tell the story now. And that always directly impacts the sense of humor for a show. And so for Touchstone, in the productions that I'd seen in the past, it was hard to locate. And his humor in particular is already hard to locate just on its own. But I would often find sort of like, I would ask myself, what's going on in those scenes? What's I don't really know how it's working there. So that was sort of my experience of watching them in the past. But then encountering it for this version, I thought that the placement of the sort of like 60s Woodstock sort of feel and the adaptation that we had was really, really helped out with the placement of that stuff.
So it wasn't like you had this challenge of cracking the nut of Touchstone. You felt like it was kind of readily available.
Oh, well, I mean, it's still a challenge, but fortunately, I think our adaptation weeded out some of the more gnarly passages that were, perhaps more challenging, just in terms of legibility and how people can actually receive it. But yeah, I mean, I just had a blast to it.
We did a little side-by-side. David Ivers was on for an interview with me a couple days ago, and we did a little side-by-side, the original text of that mustard pancake thing.
Yeah.
And so his sort of adaptation of that and then the original text. And it's so much easier to understand.
It is. And it's all, but it's also hard because like you're sort of like trading nonsense for nonsense,
Right.
but you have to just sort of update the modernity of the nonsense so that we can grasp it.
What do you think Touchstone is after in this story?
I think he's sort of after a change, somebody who's going to sort of willy nilly hop off into a new life. One, I don't know if he's hopping off into a new life right away. I think that he's just sort of going off with the ladies for an adventure, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a change of pace, and then when he gets out there, yeah, it's a kind of love letter of a travelogue. Like he falls in love with the spot that he's in, and he's like all of a sudden he can see new possibilities for his future and his life, and he just goes for it. I mean, I would say as an actor, you travel around a lot, so you have all these different experiences in different parts of the world, different parts of the country, and you're like, oh, well, what would it be like if I lived here? And then you get that experience for like a couple of months. And there's definitely been times when I've been in spots when you're like, maybe I'm not going to go back to New York. Maybe I am just going to stay up here.
Right. His journey is similar to the traveling actor troubadour's journey.
Yeah, and I think also like for just a lot of people in the world in general, like if you find yourself sort of in a rutted place and then you have this opportunity that visits you, you can either stay with what you know and the comfort of that, or like, I think that's one of the beautiful things of the play is like get out into the wild open and see what awaits you there.
When did you know that you wanted to go out into the wild open, metaphorically, as an actor? When did you say to yourself, this is it, this is the life for me, I want to do this?
I was just in the wild. I was in Syracuse over the last week shooting a film, and I was talking to, the young lead who's 20 years old, and she's fairly early on in her journey, but, she was asking me questions about moving to New York and when did you know that you wanted to do this? And it was, I haven't had that conversation in a while, and it's different when you frame it up with somebody as impressionable as a 20-year-old person is. And it took me back to that time. It was probably, I caught the bug in a little town in Iowa. Really in high school was when it turned on. And I was fortunate to have an amazing teacher and also just a wonderful group of people. And we made some really, really wonderful plays in high school. And it's one of those things where you didn't realize how special it was until I left and I heard about other people's experiences. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I had a really great time. And so I fell in love with it there, but I didn't know if it was possible for me to do it, being from a small town in Iowa. And then I went to college in Milwaukee at Marquette University. And with the intention of, I knew I was going to act in plays and stuff, but I didn't know if that was going to be what I could do because I didn't really have any examples of what that would look like aside from like television. Mm-hmm. I saw Phantom of the Opera in Chicago, on a high school trip. So then when I was in college, I was like, well, let's try to figure that out. And then so I met some of those folks in Milwaukee, had a scene, but I was still like not sure that I was going to do this for my life because I wasn't sure if that was possible for me. But what I found out was once I started doing plays in college, I just never left the building. So I was like, okay, well, that's what you're going to do. But then even from there, I would visit friends in Chicago and stuff. And I was like, I don't know that this is the spot for me. And and I was like, I visited Los Angeles, but I was like, that I don't think is my vibe. And I was like, I think I have to go east. So then I went to grad school for more training at Brown University / Trinity Rep, which is a very highly regarded regional theater in Providence, Rhode Island. And I studied there. That got me out east. And then I moved to New York and I started figuring it out. But I think it was in college that I was like, okay, people are pursuing this. So I think I'm going to take a chance. And back then, I still say it now, but back then I was like, I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can get away with it. And that's still what we're doing.
Was Shakespeare a part of your career from the start? Is it something that just kind of orbits in and orbits out in your acting career?
I was in a production of The Comedy of Errors in high school. And you're just, I think you're reminding me, I think that was my first Shakespeare play. I played one of the Dromios and put shoe polish in my hair. But yeah, I mean, in my high school experience, again, which was so wonderful, shout out to my drama teacher, Stacy Hansen, who I'm still close with back in Iowa. And we did contemporary plays, we did classical plays. I mean, we did Moliere as a high schooler, and
That's amazing.
yeah, and to have that experience
At a public high school.
Yeah.
Wow. That
Yeah.
is really unusual.
Yeah. And so to have that exposure to these things, to be like, okay, this is possible. And like what classical material also teaches an actor's imagination, head imagination, and physical imagination as well. Opened up huge doors for me. And so I always held it close to my heart. Then I did some more when I was in undergrad. And then, I definitely did a lot more Shakespeare in grad school. But, I wasn't sure that I was going to be a classical actor or whatever that is. Because, when I got out of school, I was just I did a lot of new work actually at first. And then I got myself into the acting company.
The company called the Acting
Acting Company. Yeah.
Right.
And I went on tour with them with a production of Henry V that Davis McCallum directed, and had an amazing time working on that play with a really wonderful group of folks. And then, as it happens, once you sort of pick a path in this business, things start to line up. And so, like this is often like musical theater performers will say, "Oh, well, that's all I do. I don't get to do other stuff." Like when I've been in now musical theater shows and I say, "Oh, I also do a lot of Shakespeare," they're like, how do you go back and forth?" And it's kind of like, well, if you find success at one thing, they're gonna say, "Do you want to do this next thing that's in the same genre?" But yeah, I had a great go with that production, and then when I got back, one of the next things that I did was with Fiasco, and that was our very first production of Cymbeline. And then, I mean, I can tell that story, but we had rampant success with that. And then like that put me, it sort of aligned my values with my career at that stage. And I was fortunate enough to do a number of plays, number of Shakespeare's with Fiasco and with other folks. And then I spent a lot of time doing Shakespeare.
We had Jesse Austrian on long ago. You had played the Duke in Measure for Measure, the Play on podcast series, which you did just brilliantly. The Duke is talks more than anybody in that play, and navigating that language is so challenging, and you did a brilliant job. But Jesse talked a lot about Cymbeline, that production didn't just kind of cement things for you as you're describing, but for the entire company of Fiasco.
Yeah, it was amazing. I remember we were doing it. So we done it in a tiny little walk up in Tribeca, and then we moved uptown to the New Vic. So we went from, I think, like 60 seats to 500 seats. And then we moved it from there to the Barrow Street Theater in the West Village, which is like 200 seats. But we ran it, I think, for 8 months or something. And I remember, I don't know if it was our opening or that weekend or something, but the great Cherry Jones came to see it. And, we were a young, sprightly theater troupe, and there were 6 of us in the show. And afterwards, she said, "Hold on to this as long as you can, because you're all going to get pulled from this. But what you have is so great, and so hang on to it as long as you can." And fortunately, I mean, we have been able to keep ourselves together for a number of projects over the years.
Are you working on anything with them now?
We have a lot of things that are in the pipeline, but we are developing things this year. So the previous 2 years were pretty robust seasons for us producerally,
Mm.
and so we need a year to sort of catch our breath from producing a whole show.
Would you call it your home theatrically?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and it's a rare thing to be a part of an ensemble theater company that really is actor driven, meaning that we're all actors, but we make the decisions, and we also make those decisions more or less as a collective. We have standing meetings, usually once a week, where we discuss whatever is going on and what we're working on next. We decide what we're going to do all as a group. We read a ton of things together out loud. It's a special, special spot. And it's like, I've known these people now for 20 years. And that's an amazing thing to be able to have in any career, but especially in an artistic career, because that, those are mirrors with history.
Yeah. I mean, being with a collective of artists that you know so well. I mean, there's a holding each other accountable in a sense, knowing each other so very, very well, and just a joy in the playing, I would imagine, because of that intrinsic knowledge that you have of each other and of each other's skills and the ability to probably just throw things at each other that will ignite.
The word family always gets thrown around, and I think sometimes it's a useful term, and other times I think it's a manipulative one.
Yes.
Um,
When it
uh,
comes from production, it's manipulative. When it comes from the ensemble, it's truth,
yeah, right.
in
I think
my
that's
experience.
I think that's probably right. If someone's telling you that we're a family, you might not be.
Right.
um, uh, but yeah, the other thing that happens with that too is, like, with that amount of history, you know that they're seeing you do that stuff, and it's like, so often in the theater where you show up as a kind of stranger. You've been cast by somebody who's from somewhere else, and then you're meeting these various folks, and it's like, okay, so maybe you can just put on your old tricks or whatever.
Mhm.
But when you're with people that you have a history with, you're like, well, I can't do it that way because I've done it that way before, and they know that I'm just resting on my laurels, or
Right.
So it it keeps you honest in a different sort of way.
It's interesting to me to hear you say a rarity. It's a rarity for a theater to be actor driven with just a small group of actors. And yet Shakespeare's theater company was just that, right?
Yeah.
The King's Men, 9 actors, right? Maybe 11 or 12, depending. And Shakespeare was one of them,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, also call back Moliere as well. This is the model. I mean, the I have a lot of actor friends, and one of the things that we love to kvetch about is, sometimes, like, what, the directors have all the power and stuff. But also, we need to remember that the director, in terms of the theater art form, is a relatively recent invention.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if America or capitalism loves verticality. Maybe it's just easier for institutions to elect that one person to be the person who's the project manager, and so therefore that's why they hold all the power and stuff. I imagine that is the case because a lot of these institutions have sort of been corporatized. But yeah, it's not. It hasn't always been the way, and I think that actors. I think that we can also give up a lot of our power or have it taken away from us when so much of that creativity is, especially the lead of it, is put into the hands of somebody who is not in the show that you're doing.
Yeah.
Which and in Fiasco, one of the ways that we've navigated that in the past is the directors have also been acting in the show.
Now that's a crossing of the Rubicon that I just can't imagine. I mean, that's really hard. Have you done that? yourself?
I have not done it. They won't. I don't think they'd let me direct something.
Why? Challenge laid down. Jesse
Yeah.
Austrian,
Yeah.
we hereby declare that Andy Grotelueschen shall direct whether he likes it or not. Why haven't they trusted you with it yet, do you think?
Oh, I don't
Too
know.
busy.
I don't know. I worry about my own sensitivities as a director. Perhaps I might say something in the wrong way. And I haven't, other members of Fiasco have flexed those muscles or developed them in a different way. And they're sort of more drawn to that than I am. And also I've witnessed what happens with the Fiasco director slash actor. It's because, conceptually I can say like, oh, well, directors are a recent invention, but like it's a necessary thing. You have to have a point person
Right.
that's making the decisions and handling these things. And like, also people don't want to talk to 8 people
Right.
about a decision. They just need somebody to make the decision. And I've watched, my compatriots when they've been wearing both of those hats, bear the burden of that responsibility, and it's a lot.
Olivier did it, right? He was the artistic director, founder of the National Theater, and directed the plays that he was in. And Randall Duck Kim at American Players Theater, who founded that theater, directing when he played Prospero, he was directing The Tempest. I just that ability to, I mean, you'd have to have somebody watch you and direct you from the outside. You'd have to trust your peers to do that. I would assume it just.
Well, in Fiasco, that's why for many projects we will do 2 directors,
Mm,
to sort of like help, especially with those situations, because it gets really dicey in there if you're acting with somebody and they start directing you, and you're like, well, who's directing you?
right.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You've worked so much with Fiasco. You've worked in these really scrappy, cool downtown theaters off Broadway, but you've also been on Broadway. You got nominated for the Tony in Tootsie. When I saw you were last on stage. You were in a huge production, The Sign in Sidney Brustein's Window, which I get, and that did go to Broadway, didn't it? Or it became a Broadway contract. What is how does it change when you're working in commercial theater as opposed to these smaller entities like Fiasco? Or does it change? Does it feel like it's pretty much the same thing?
I remember talking with a wonderful actor friend of mine. Her name is Crystal Finn. I don't know if you know her. She's a wonderful actor and playwright, and also a very funny person. And she was doing a show at the Roundabout on Broadway, and she had some funny things to do in there. And I saw her during that, and she said to me, she's like, it's so much easier to be funny on Broadway than off. I had to check myself for a second because, of course, well, no, only the best people can make funny things on Broadway. There's so many people, it's because you're the best doing it. But actually what she said was like, it's so much harder to make a small group of people laugh all together than it is, a relatively large group of people in a really big group of people. Yeah. If you're performing for 60 people and you're trying to land a joke and you get 10 people to laugh at that, you hear 10 people laughing at that. If you're performing for 1,000 people, that sounds like a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, all the other people that are around them are like, oh, ha, 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 ha. It really starts to open it up. And I thought that was a wonderful insight, that in a lot of ways, it's easier to do things on Broadway than it is off, because, everybody's there to have a good time. They've signed up for it. It's important to them.
Yeah, they paid a lot of money, right? They've gone out, had drinks, probably.
Mm-hmm. They paid for the sitter. They paid for parking. They are gonna have a good time.
Was the last one that you did, the last big show, was it Sign in Sidney Brewstein's window?
Yeah, that was the last big one. Yeah.
How was that experience for you with Oscar Isaac and
Rachel Brosnahan? It was fantastic. It's one of those dream come true sorts of experiences. So Annie Kaufman called. She's an amazing director.
Yes, I know her.
And I just did a workshop with her, but I got a call out of the blue for that, and it's like, hey, do you want to do this role in this show at BAM, at the Harvey? I think it's called the Strong now, which is my favorite theater in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn. It's a 15-minute walk from my house.
Bliss.
Peter Brook designed this space. I've seen so many wonderful things there. I'd never done a show there, and so then I got to do this show, Lorraine Hansberry's magnificent, little-known play, right, and little-performed play, with Annie Kaufman. Also, Oscar Isaac was going to be in it, and Rachel Brosnahan was going to be in it. These are actors that I admire very much. And also, one of my best friends, Miriam Silverman, was also going to be in it. And we had actually, we went to grad school together. We were each other's very first acting scene partners in school, and we'd never worked together professionally. So putting all these things together was just a dream. We did it at BAM, and it was a really wonderful experience. And then we thought maybe that it would go to Broadway, but we weren't really sure if it was going to happen. And then the show closed at BAM. And this is funny. Show closed at BAM, and we were like, it's closing. That's it. Everybody went on vacation. And then I think we closed on a Saturday, and on Monday I had a call from Miriam that was like, I think it might be back on again. And it was like, what? And then it was like 2 days later, or I think the next day, I got a call from Annie, and she was like, availability check. Can you go to Broadway in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? It's like, yeah, okay, great. But this happened. There was a miscommunication, and BAM threw out the set.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yes.
Yes. Oh my God.
And so
they had to rebuild the set.
They had to rebuild the set in like a week.
Oh my God. What a fiasco. Wow. I hope they hired the same carpenters and they got paid overtime.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and it was crazy because when we showed up at the theater, a couple weeks later, like it was for us, it was like, oh, so great. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. And the designers were a little harried. You could tell because they'd been really working their asses off, and it was like there was vintage wallpaper that was on the old set that they couldn't reproduce. It was all that stuff.
Who didn't
it was just amazing.
Send the memo that this might go to Broadway? Oh. Wow. So you just described, this is interesting, right? Because it's a play that started out big. I mean, BAM is big, right? BAM is a big house. It's a big reputation. It's like the RSC or the National in Great Britain or something. It's like, or Lincoln Center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Brooklyn's Lincoln Center.
Right. And so you're there, and you said it was such a wonderful experience. What was it like then having to cross the river and go to another house and do it in another venue?
I wasn't ready for it, but it was amazing the welcoming spirit of Lorraine Hansberry coming back to Broadway was it just turned the volume of it up. And the play is about the West Village in the early 50s and 60s, mid 50s and 60s, and there's all these references to Manhattan and uptown and downtown. So it just felt like moving the apartment back to where it was originally supposed to be. And also the audience is like at BAM is also like a little more experimental than a lot of things that happen on Broadway. And so I think also some of the critical gaze on it from audiences in BAM were sort of like, okay, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? And on Broadway, I think the reception was so warm, and the audiences, they were just receiving the play in such an open way that was just a real joy to be a part.
Talking to you, I'm realizing something that I never would have expected, but it sounds from your description and your experience anyway, like Broadway has a sort of an openness and a willingness that you don't find as much in the more scrappy experimental. As you said, there's a little bit more of a critical gaze on the things that aren't on Broadway.
I hope I don't butcher this too badly, but I have the concept of it. George C. Wolfe had a great thing. I was listening to an interview with him, and he was like, what show was it? Shuffle Along, I think, that he was directing on Broadway. And, this is a guy who he used to run the Public Theater. And so he worked in downtown, but then also, did things uptown as well. And he would say of Broadway, he's like, the American theater and Broadway are not the same thing. And things that succeed on Broadway can't necessarily succeed in the American theater. And things that succeed at the highest levels of the American theater might not succeed on Broadway. Broadway is its own thing. It's a little more of a Wild West. It's kind of like the restaurant business or something. There's more failures than there are successes.
I was going to ask you about Tootsie, and if Tootsie had the same feel that you're describing of just that, was it a delight, or did you feel like you were punching the clock? Like did it get to be a grind? You're doing 8 shows a week, right? And Tootsie ran a long time.
Yeah, you really do sort of live at the theater. It feels that way. So I had been on Broadway before in Cyrano de Bergerac, which is classical. So I kind of felt like I felt comfortable there, and I was like, hey, great classical thing on Broadway, wonderful. I was just happy to be there. But Tootsie, when it first came up, I was like, they're remaking a really beloved by me and by everybody, by so many, beloved film classic. They're going to put it into a musical. And I was like, I think that sounds terrible. And, they were like, come in for the workshop and let's read it, stuff. And I was, first I was just reading the script at home and some of these jokes. And I was like, shit, this is really funny. And then I got it. Then I got in the room, but I was still like, this is going to be hokey. And the people that Scott Ellis, the director, got into that room are so funny. And I was there with them, and and these jokes by Robert Horn, who also wrote a really lovely script. They're so funny, and we just had such a great time. And I was like, holy shit, I think I might want to be in this remake of a classic film into a stupid Broadway musical. and basically I was just happy that they let me keep doing it. And so I really had a really wonderful time on that. A very unique experience, and so grateful for it.
You're doing some film and television now. You just said you did a film that you were shooting upstate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you want to do more of?
All actors are interested in doing TV and film. All actors are mostly interested in doing as much as they can to make as much money as they can. And, you really have to diversify the different aspects of your career. And they are also, theater work isn't necessarily complementary to your TV and film stuff. It definitely nourishes the soul and your creativity and your imagination and things, and sometimes your wallet. But you got to find a balance. So always trying to hunt down the other opportunities as well. But I'm sure you've heard this too. But the experience largely working in TV and film, it's not as organic or as fulfilling as like doing a play. The play is like it's being performed by the people who are doing it. And, you're all there for a few hours every night making the world happen. In TV and film, it's like that camera is really taking everything. And, the director is really the one who's responsible for how everything is getting put in there. And, there's 20 people that are behind the scenes while you're shooting this thing. And then you do it, 8, 10 different ways, and then hope that they got whatever it is that they need. And then you don't know, you have no control over it. Like what's going to happen on the other side. And, they decided to use that one. I remember doing that one. I wouldn't have used that one, but so it's nothing's better than plays. Nothing.
Except podcasts.
Of course. I mean, that's of course.
No, but what was so our podcast sort of at least this experience with the As You Like It. Do you feel like it's a sort of the medium between the two, theater and like television or film?
Yeah.
Or I mean, you can be honest. You don't have to dress it up just because we're talking about the podcast because you're in it.
On a podcast.
Right.
Don't bite the hand that feeds.
Is it yes, all the podcast money that you'll lose if you don't praise us. But I'm curious to know, like, did it feel like you were doing television or doing did it feel like going to the set, or did it feel more theater-y?
I guess it does feel like an odd sort of hybrid, especially with something like this, because it's like obviously I've been working on Shakespeare plays with you guys, so it's kind of like casting the theater into a new space. But as I've said before, I think when we've talked about it, it's like it definitely has a different theatricality when that you're speaking into people's heads, like when you're talking into their ears, and the fidelity is so high that you can whisper and do some very small things on the podcast that can really reach where on stage you could never do it. So I guess in that way it feels a little filmic because of the intimacy of the microphone, but also with the theatricality of because you have to do all this, you have to do so much sound design also around it to create the world. Right. So that's a sort of different theatrical space too.
You had said to me, where else can you do takes of Shakespeare?
I mean, even more, I think, on a podcast than like a film shoot or something.
Right.
Because, if you just give me, it takes to get the shot. You can't do a thing. I mean, unless you're Tarantino or something, you can't do a thing, 10, 12, 15 times.
Right.
But on a podcast recording, you'd be like, oh, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's great because, you can bang it out in a half an hour.
Would you like to do this role on stage, Touchstone?
Yeah.
What do you think is there's a part of the whole Touchstone journey that I'm like, why? How did this happen? And it's the Audrey relationship. What is going on for Touchstone there, do you think? Is he just smitten by, what is it about Audrey that turns his head?
I think it's the fish out of water story. And then, when you discover yourself in kind of new culture, and then there's a possibility of a partnering that's inside of that is constantly surprising. It's the sign of commitment for him. He's not just he's sort of like he's not just gaga and outside of himself. He's still got a lot of self-awareness and ego. So I think that she may also be the commitment, the sign to himself that, like, I am doing this. I'm actually doing this. I'm committing to living in this new world. And this person is the representation of that in our partnership, because I'm really going for it, even though he's not really sure if that's the best idea or what. He's just going for it.
It's such an endearing story, and it's I always wonder, like, do you think he stays? Do you think he'll ever go? Do you think he'll bring Audrey back? I mean, do you ever think past the end, what happens, or do you just kind of leave it like that's all she wrote?
There's a melancholy that's laced into the story, and it's, we're often greeted to it by Jaques. There's no running away from the problems. That's another part of the play. It follows us. Life will follow you around. It's life. So, I mean, what happens afterwards? All the complexities will come. I would hope that things go well, but I'm sure that it will also go quite poorly at sometimes. And those kinds of, when we make those kinds of decisions, you're really opening up some big space for possible regret that you're going to have to deal with. I never should have done this. I never should have done this. Terrible. But also, you know that Audrey is going to be like, I want to go to the city. Take me down to the city.
Yeah.
And then he'll see what she's like there.
Right. And is he going to be embarrassed about her? Is he going
right.
to, or is he going to embrace her? Is he going to,
Right. Will she leave him when she gets there?
Right.
She'll meet a city guy, and he'll be like, damn it, that's exactly what I knew was going to happen.
I mean, we get a little hint of it at the end, right? When the Duke is back and everybody's together, and you tell Audrey to cover up, right?
Yeah.
Make yourself more seemly.
Well,
we hope that it works out for both of them.
Yes.
I mean, It has to. What's next for you? Do you know? Do you have things lined up that you're looking forward to digging into, or that you're working on now?
What's next? I'm going to jump back on the boards with Theater for New Audience. That's a New York theater company. They did a production of Merchant of Venice a few years ago, starring John Douglas Thompson. And they're taking that show to Scotland in January. So that's the next, I think that's probably going to be my next stage production. I didn't do their production a few years ago, but I'm going to join it.
And you'll get to go to Scotland. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Edinburgh, Glasgow?
Edinburgh. I was just there this past summer. My girlfriend was doing a play at the Fringe Festival, which is the biggest Fringe Festival in the world. So I was there for a week in August, and it was really amazing. Really amazing. Incredible. The city's so beautiful. And then this came up a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, yes, I will go back.
Well, make sure you take a weekend and go to the Highlands, because there's nothing like it.
We went back in August. We spent a week up there. It was just gorgeous. I mean, otherworldly.
Well, Andy Grotelueschen, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you. It's great to talk about Touchstone and to talk about all the work that you've done. It's such an incredible journey you've had, and you're in the middle of just a phenomenal, exciting, wonderful career. It's an honor to have you as a part of the whole thing here with As You Like It and Measure for Measure. I hope we get you to do more.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation, and thanks for the work.
You've been listening to the Play On Podcast bonus content series. You can learn more about the Play On Podcast at Next Chapter Podcast website, nextchapterpodcasts.com, where you can find other Play On Podcast series and interviews, along with talk podcasts like The 500, Indecent with Kiki Anderson, Beef with Bridget Todd, Our New South, and a whole lot more. I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcasts, and my producer, Pete Musto. Our audio engineer, editor, and sound designer is Justin Cortese. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content, and don't forget to rate and review our shows. I'm Michael Goodfriend, and I look forward to sharing more incredible works in the Play On podcast series with you, along with lots of enlightening bonus content at Next Chapter Podcast.
The world is facing urgent, monumental issues, and you may be considering a career change where you can make a global impact, even if you don't know where to begin. In the heart of Washington, D.C., gain world-renowned expert knowledge and a global network as you pursue a master's degree and turn your new passion into practice. Thousands of the world's leaders found their purpose at the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. Are you next?
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/kidsandfamily. Just go to Indeed.com/kidsandfamily right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Next Chapter Podcasts.